Hello and welcome back, everybody, to episode 5 of Capital Consciousness. And today we're going to be talking about the art of asking for money. All right, so there are several factors. This is a pretty broad subject. I'm going to do my best to try to be inclusive, but for the most part, we're going to be talking about personal asks, business asks, student asks, and other kinds of qualifiers. So let's start there. Well, what are qualifiers? Qualifiers, they are these data points that other people hold, whether or not you like it or agree with it. People are out there collecting data points on you that they use to qualify you for things like loans, grants, tax breaks, and those are some of the things that we're going to get into. But qualifiers, they can be things like race, age, gender, status, whether you're married or you're a student or you're hired. There are lots of different kinds of qualifiers, but the ones that are going to be important to you are the ones that particularly pertain to the kind of money you're asking for. All right, so let's start with a very common person to ask, which would be the bank. Now, the bank, they're not necessarily in the business of giving away money. So there are not a lot of types of asks that I want to talk about because not every kind of ask you can get from the bank is a good one. Like, for example, a personal loan is probably not a great idea unless you're doing it in the form of, say, a credit card. Because now you can build credit, which anytime you ask or anytime you're in a financial situation, if your credit score is good, you're going to be better off. Your interest rates are going to be lower. So that's a pretty good and healthy kind of ask from the bank when it comes to money. But another one that I want to talk about is business loans. So this one requires lots of preparation. But when it comes to saving money, especially on taxes, this is probably one of the best things that you can do for yourself, and it's not as hard as everyone might think. So this one does require a bit of an upfront cost because in order to ask for a business loan, you need to be a business. And to do that, you need to purchase a business license, which can run anywhere from like $200, if you get somebody who you know personally, like probably closer to like $300 to $500 for a professional that you hire. And so once you have your LLC or C Corp, most likely it'll be either an LLC, a partnership, or a solo venture. Once you've incorporated, you can literally just incorporate yourself. You can say, I incorporate me as a human being to do things like try to make money through my hobbies. Once you have your incorporation, now you can start getting tax breaks in the form of anywhere that you drive or anything that you buy that is helping you make money as an individual. You can now write off, including things like portions of your rent, meals. Like there's a lot of things that you're doing every day that you can now begin to get your tax back at the end of the year using your corporation as kind of this safety net to catch all that money that you've been spending. Another kind of essential asset to a business loan, and the reason that I think that it is worth mentioning, but a personal loan is not, is because a business loan normally requires you to have created a business plan. And if you have a business plan, what you essentially have is documentation saying that I have thought out a way to make money that has margins, and so I am prepared to ask for this much to do these things. That's very important to a bank. And if you can get all the way down to those brass tacks, what you've probably created is an income stream. And I definitely approve. We love income streams here. So yeah, that's a solid ask, is to ask for a business loan from a bank. Just being able to be in that position in life is a really good financial situation to find yourself in. I'm going to, so we talked for a second about tax breaks. I want to expand upon that and invite in, though, those of us that maybe aren't necessarily willing or looking to start businesses right now. So if you're looking for a way to collect more money on your taxes, well, number one, you can hire a professional, but that's the easy out, and they're going to charge you a percent. So I want to talk about this little known secret that is actually IRS backed, and that's where I found this information, was on the IRS website. It's this terminology that kind of encapsulates the ability to write off anywhere up, I think the total is 15% a year. You can write off a big chunk of your tax return, or your taxes, and get it returned through this term called fair market value. And so what fair market value is if you are donating, whether it be time or it be goods, or even services, I think, maybe not services, don't quote me on that one, but definitely goods. If you're donating things, say you have an old laptop or clothing or whatever it is, you are within your right to do a fair market value assessment. Now what that means is that you can hop on the internet and you can snag a picture or an ad from something that's almost identical or is identical to what it is that you're donating, and you assess it based on the IRS's assessment sheet. And so if it is like brand new, in the box, still in the plastic, has the tag, never been opened, you can actually get 100% of the market value, the fair market value for that object. And so the scale kind of drops down as the quality of the goods goes down. I think all the way down to, I think 40% if it's a little tethered, if you don't have the original tags, if it's been worn, or like whatever, what have you. You have to be honest, and so you document these things. You take the picture of the thing that you donated, the picture of the fair market value, and then your percentage assessment according to the IRS's schema, and you're allowed to take whatever that total is and write it off of your taxes at the end of the year, up to 15%. So this can be a pretty good way to kind of give yourself a little paycheck, if you will, at the end of the year if you got a bunch of stuff that you're trying to purge, which a lot of us do around New Year's anyways, right? So it's not a bad habit to get into, to kind of like capitalize on your purging and do something constructive. So we talked for a second about a business loan. I want to also talk about kinds of businesses and why I consider these different qualifiers of businesses to technically be a form of asking for money. Specifically, I want to talk about nonprofits, which I don't even know if I believe that term nonprofit to be true, because most nonprofits are for profit, otherwise they would collapse. But the term nonprofit, so going back to qualifiers, and this is one I kind of recommend you do a good amount of research in. Worst case scenario, you get told no, but you don't want to be applying for a nonprofit business license if you haven't met the qualifiers. So definitely do your diligence and the research there. But if you qualify for a nonprofit, not only does that give you huge tax incentives, not only does that ethically open you up for opportunities like donations and fundraisers, but that also opens you up very advantageously for the world of grants. Grants can be extremely powerful, and there are a lot of different kinds of grants. So I am going to pull up a cheat sheet right here. I'm going to grants.gov, and so grants.gov is a great starting point if you have absolutely no experience with grants. I highly recommend this is a kind of your first stop, because it'll break down for you what to expect, the life cycle of a grant, because grants, they're a kind of ask for money that you have to do every year. It's like an annual ask most of the time. Some are a little different, but for the most part, every year. And you have to stay qualified in order to keep receiving the grant. And so there's a lot of different qualifiers that help with grant situations, but nonprofit is definitely one. As a veteran, I can tell you personally that a veteran status is also extremely, extremely valuable to have in the world of grants, because it can get you in with military circles, which are pretty small and pretty tight. So if you're a veteran and you're an entrepreneurial type, which many of us are, definitely look into your grants. So there are, according to, sorry, this is a weird website, but it is a Gov website, so bear with me. nidcd.nih.gov, which is the National Institute on Deafness and Other Communication Disorders. I know that sounds weird, but this government website has this breakdown right here of the qualifiers, if you will, for grants, or the different types. So there are small business grants, which is probably the most accessible to the average human being. There are clinical research center grants. This one, you're probably looking at like a PhD, 8-year academic commitment to enter that world. Clinical trials funding, now you're looking at like international based teams of PhDs. So that one is even less accessible. You have conference grants. So this is if you are doing kind of government approved facilitation in a sense. There is administrative supplements. I'm not 100% sure on that one, so we're gonna click and go deeper. Let's see. So this says the National Institute of Health, or NIH, which is what this website stands for, has posted guidance regulating the administrative supplements. The announcement informs principal investigators, or PILs, holding specific types of NIH grants to be available for honestly, a generic administrative supplement. So this is for like human consumption. And it's more about like not quite drugs, because the very next level is funding for drug development, but this is that kind of in between things like protein, vitamins, those kinds of developments, because anything that is going to make it into a pharmacy or even a pharmacy section has to go under rigorous testing before it's allowed for human consumption like that. And then they have loan repayment programs. Loan repayment programs, it's going to work similarly to like a debt forgiveness or consolidation situation. And we did a lot of talking about that last week. So if you didn't have an opportunity and you're interested in kind of like debt management and debt strategy, I highly recommend that you check out last week's episode 4 of which was all about debt management. But getting back to the topic at hand, I definitely, if you're considering either loan repayment programs through grants, or you're considering debt forgiveness, consolidation, I highly recommend that you do the math on all of your options and choose the one that's going to give you the most. Right? Because debt forgiveness, depending on where you're at in your debt cycle, can be massive, up to 40%. If your debt had to go to collections and you're somewhere between year 4 and year 5 of that collection being sitting there without any payments, then most likely in one lump sum, you're looking at a 40% debt forgiveness ratio. Now, debt consolidation, I only feel that there's 2 viable types that are actually going to help you. So type number 1 is essentially you apply all of your debt to a new credit card that has a temporary interest suspension. And then the only way I recommend that you even step up to do this is if you can pretty much guarantee that you're either going to have that income that allows you to make the payments until it's paid off all the way through, Otherwise, most likely this credit card, you're looking probably at like 23 to 28% because we're talking about managing debt that you've already accrued. And so your credit score is already probably pretty screwed at this point. But that's okay because this system is probably the best for fixing your credit as you are making your payments. Now, what you're going to do in this scenario is you're going to want to research credit cards, but specifically zero interest credit cards. Most of them are going to be for the first 21 months. So if it is a massive debt and you cannot pay it off in just under 2 years, then this strategy is probably not for you anyways. But if you have, say, like you're looking at like $15,000 or less and you come up with a smart comprehensive plan, you could probably pay that off in 2 years, no problem, and you're going to stop accruing interest the day that you swap all of your credit to this new credit card situation. And then the other type, let me pull up my cheat sheet real quick. So getting a fixed rate or debt consolidation. Now this goes back to the grants or to that negotiation. That's the part I want to talk about right now, is the negotiation that happens when you're trying to get out of debt, especially when you are kind of midlife debt, as I call it. Midlife meaning that it's not a brand new debt that went to collections, and you're not very close to it falling off or out of collections either. You're like somewhere in between. And when you have midlife debt, you're kind of in this weird situation where although you're in trouble, you also have power. And the reason that you have power is because the person who's calling you all the time, those debt collectors, they're basically looking to get anything they can out of you. And you have the power because they bought your debt at a mega discount, and they're not going to tell you. But if you go all the way down to anywhere, if they only get like 40% to 30% most of the time of what your debt actually was, they're still going to either break out even or make a decent amount of profit, enough to pay people to call you all day, every day. And so like the dirty secret is that the longer you wait, the more power you have. The more power you have because statistically, the longer you wait, the more likely that they're going to get nothing. And that starts to make them sweat. And so whenever you call a debt collector, the first thing that they're going to want to do is they're going to try to intimidate you by getting as much personal information as they can about you. They're going to want, every time, they're going to want your address, your phone number, your blood type. I mean, not like that, but it's pretty close. And once they're done kind of, shaking you down like that, then they're going to hit you with the worst ask that they have, which is like, basically, when are you going to start making your payments on time? And when are you going to pay everything that you haven't paid up until now? Well, this is where you start to lowball them, because they're going to be coming out from one extreme, so you come at them from the other, which I normally say, like, I have no money today to pay. I do have some money in my bank account, but I have no money available for this debt because it's too massive, and so I need to negotiate. What are my options? Now, you want to hear all your options. All your options, there should be at least 3. There should be a lump sum option, there should be a shortened, like 1 to 2 year option, and then there should be basically you just continue to pay the minimum. And that's what they want because they get the most money from that. Ideally, you're going to be looking at that lump sum chunk, but the way that you position yourself will shrink that lump sum. So the closer you are to the drop-off debt, sure, but also the less money that they've been able to collect from you throughout that course, statistically that shows that you're just very likely to not pay anything at all. So you have to be honest. If you get to a place with debt where you cannot pay it, it's almost like bankruptcy. You got to ask yourself, is it worth it to continue to make these minimum payments, considering my credit's already dinged and I cannot afford it? Or do I stop paying and start playing the power game? Every situation is different. Do the math. Do the math for yourself and figure out, is this actually going to benefit me or is this going to hurt me? Do the math every time, down to the penny. All right. Well, I think I'm gonna open up the floor a little bit. Hey, Joshua, how are you doing, man? What brings you into the conversation today?
Just listening in.
Wonderful. Does any of this stuff resonate you? I know you kind of work in the world of veterans as I do, and kind of nonprofits, and so you're very familiar with things like grants and student loan, especially since you may, you just entered the academic world. Which congratulations, by the way, for that. Um,
Thank you.
yeah, has any of this information kind of like ringing any bells, or do you have anything? Because you have your own level of expertise. Do you have anything you want to share, bring to the table?
No, just a lot of the information you shared was a nice revisit and reminder.
Excellent. Um, So I'm gonna share a couple of resources in case that like any of this stuff is you want to do your own research, which I highly recommend it. I love people that do their own research. So nerdwallet.com. This one has a free consolidation calculator. So if you are in debt and you're looking to kind of start to weigh your options in numbers, a debt consolidation tool is a good place to start because it gives you information before other people figure it out for you, so you can come to the table with a little bit of wisdom. Um, let's see. Another great resource is studentaid.gov. So studentaid.gov, this is a connection to FAFSA. It's if you are either already a student or looking to enter the world of higher learning, so that you can maybe increase your bottom line, because that's another ask that we'll talk about just here in a second, which is pay and pricing. But this is a great resource to kind of start looking for loan forgiveness. There's lots of different techniques and lots of different reasons, and what's great about it is if you get ahead of the ball, like I'm looking at the list right now, they have one that says public service loan forgiveness or teacher loan forgiveness. Well, those are actually degree types. And so if you're smart about what degree you pick, you might actually come out the other side with more loan forgiveness opportunities. So yeah, definitely check out studentaid.gov if you are or looking to get academic. Then there's just a really simple one, scholarships.com. Enough said, make your account, find out what you're eligible for. They have lots of qualifiers. They'll connect you with the ones that you match with. Already went over the grant resources. We'll get to that. Okay. All right. So stepping back into the world of personal asks, there is a culture of fundraising that is on the rise. There's a lot of ways of going about this. There's GoFundMe, which can be really for anything. Here on the GoFundMe website, they have a kind of like a fundraising tips section. And so if you're looking to make a fundraiser, here's what they recommend. So they want you to begin with a realistic goal. Use your title and tell a shareable story. Tell a unique story that is easy to skim. I like that. They're looking out for those people that are kind of long-fingered, like myself. Upload high-quality photos and videos. Of course, very common. Build a community. Get press coverage. Now, that one's kind of hard to do, but we could talk. Actually, I think next week's episode 6, we're going to be talking about breaking into markets. So we can dive a little bit into that next week. Updating your fundraiser regularly. So this one is mostly about like tracking that goal. If people are going to get involved, they'll probably check 2, 3, maybe even 7, 8 times on the fundraiser itself to see if there's any progress being made. And GoFundMe, I know from personal experience, it'll kind of tell you like what the activity is as far as like people donating. Not directly, but it does in its ways. And so ones that are higher activity, just like anything like social media or whatever it be, the higher engagement you get, the higher up the list of priority you go. So following up on your fundraiser, I think I'm going to save that for the next kind of fundraising campaign that I want to talk about. And then fundraising tips by category. Let's see what we have in here. So they're saying that like some good examples or good reasons to do fundraising would be like starting a sports team or fundraising a school idea, or maybe like some sort of trip. Crowdfunding. So crowdfunding, although they do it under GoFundMe.com, it's a little bit more specific in the sense that people are most likely going to be looking for a return. And it doesn't have to be money. There are lots of ways to do crowdfunding, and there's other websites that are maybe a little bit more niche, business centric, other than GoFundMe, that do fundraising specifically to create value exchanges. So one that I can think of off the top of my head was this company I observed for a while called Shroomery. Now Shroomery, what they essentially had built was a perfect little biome that you could inject any kind of mushroom spore, edible, medicinal, whatever it is, your call, and the biome would program the perfect amount of humidity, light, and everything that you needed to grow. And it advertised anywhere from 7 to 12 days because they have like their super substrate and stuff too. So this Kickstarter, which was the website that they were using, this crowdfunding situation, what they were offering was mega discounts for the first purchasers or donators, if you will. That's what they were calling it. But essentially, the first people to donate, if you donated, it was like $100, then you would get a unit. And these things were selling for like $700. So that was phase one. And then phase two, they kind of cut out a lot of the discount because they made their minimum goal, which was to sell basically 100 units. And they took that money and then they made 1,000 units, and they cut it to like 50%. Essentially, they're like, if you spend $350, we'll give you one. But now they had another deal, which is like, if you give us 1,000, we'll give you 3. And then so on and so forth. And they had, I believe, 4 rounds where essentially they used the product itself and a discount to get early access to the product as a way to scale up their prototyping. And this is a really clever way to ask for money because, first off, like, their customers were also their angel investors. And to have that kind of like hybrid reality, like, first off, like, just like brilliant, super smart, but it's extremely practical too, because you can kind of set your expectations based on your growth. And that was something that I noticed too. And phase 3, because I was tracking this Shroomery very, and by the way, they are off to the races. They hit their success like all the way up their fundraising, and so now they're like a full-fledged business and they're making plenty of money. So like, good for them. But around phase 4, they had a hiccup, and so they had to adjust their retainer a little bit to the reality that many people weren't showing up to buy the larger deal, which was like spend 1,000, get 3. And so they had like a secondary goal where they wanted to sell so many of those, and that goal kind of disappeared in the middle of phase 4, which I did notice. But again, like, they did pretty well and they were able to adjust on the fly. And so yeah, using fundraising and crowdfunding is a really good way to get started, especially if you're not quite at that level yet where you're ready to go to the bank and ask for a business loan. If you think that you're ready to go to the bank and ask for a business loan, I want you to ask yourself, do I have 90 days of trackable profits that I can use as a selling point? All the other math, all the other matrix, like, that stuff is great, but really what you need to show the bank is that I'm making profit. If you give me money, I'll make this profit margin grow, and your interest comes out of my profit. So yeah, like, that's really where you want to be when you approach business loans. Make sure I got everything. Students, fundraising, business perks, grants. Okay. Business. Let's go back to types of companies for a second, because this is a way to ask for money for sure. Now, assuming that you either have already established a business before or have some experience boarding, or just in general, like, have some experience with business I don't recommend doing this for your first business or even your first, like 2 or 3 businesses or companies, at least not right away, is to go public. And this is like the ultimate way to ask, in my opinion, for money. If you have a company, let's say you're selling lawn care products. So you're selling, well, no, I don't like lawn care products because really like lawns are kind of a waste of space. So you're selling gardening products, like natural stuff, good stuff. And your LLC is doing pretty good, but you've hit this plateau and you realize you made this plan, this big plan, but this big plan, it's going to cost you $150,000 up front and then $6,000 a month in rent to buy this warehouse. And then it's going to cost you another $250,000 to put all of the equipment in it to start doing your own production. All right, so this is a big boy step. In order to make it to this big boy step, you can either try to go to the bank and get that business loan, but most likely you either are already paying one off to get to that point, or it's just not going to cover it because that's a pretty big ask, or you can go public. So now you're talking about trading stocks. This is a really complicated way to create asks, and I think I have an entire episode dedicated to stocks, so I'm not going to get too deep into it, but very similarly to how the Shrewry story plays out, you create rounds, you create phases. And as the phases get further and further from the starting point, the more and more money you're going to make from your ask. Your first round is something they normally call the angel round, which is basically the word of mouth round for those people that were kind of almost already financially committed before you decided to go public. And then I think you have to wait 6 months to a year, depending on if you're a B Corp, C Corp, or S Corp. Those are the 3 types of corporations where you can have stocks, publicly traded stocks. If you are getting, so if you get through your angel round, everything's great. From there, your stocks kind of start to determine their own value. So the better your company does, the more money you can make when people buy your stocks. And they're going to get money back because as a potential owner, the more valuable your company comes. Like at some point, it might behoove your company to double the amount of stocks that you have. And this is called a break. And so literally everyone who owns stock in your company now owns twice as much. And like these opportunities are very exciting. And so, it's a really solid incentive for people that are professional investors to go public. It's also a great way to scout talent as well, because if you go public and you can give away ownership of your company, now you can scout like really high value talent in the form of board members or even like CEOs or whatever it is you're looking for. All right. Well, I think that about does it for today. Just to kind of recap, because we covered a lot today. So today we covered qualifiers, the little things that make you eligible for free money or asking for money. We talked about banks and the different kinds of acceptable, in my opinion, asks there are, and the ones that are not. Don't do personal loans. Never do personal loan. We talked about debt forgiveness and consolidation, and the 2 types that are actually legitimate. Anything that's not a 0% interest situation or a fixed rate is a lie, and they're looking to actually increase your interest most likely. We talked about tax breaks both as a company and as a personal situation. We talked about fair market value, which is a good way to kind of capitalize on charity. We talked about nonprofits. We talked about student benefits, scholarships, and student debt relief. And we talked about fundraising and crowdfunding, which brought us, I think actually grants was somewhere in there before that, but it all wraps together and it's all relevant. So that was the art of asking for money. Thank you so much for joining us. As always, though, I'm going to make a little room for business plugs, starting with myself. Gray Mage chats, right? So here, this situation right here, we are doing these every Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday. That's going to be 4 p.m. standard mountain time. I also am just starting this business venture. And so if you are a business owner and you paid income tax during 2020 or 2021, I actually know how to get you that income tax back, and I have a CPA certified team willing and ready to assist you in getting your tax relief for having to pay, because nobody who is paying income tax during the COVID lockdowns, they shouldn't have it. And it was found to be a crime, believe it or not. And so they're giving that money back. And if you qualify for that, if you paid W-2s, hit me up offline, and yeah, let's get you your money back because you deserve it. Anyone from the audience have anything going on they want to plug in? Well, that looks like that's it for the day. Once again, thank you so much. I love you guys, and I will see you in Thursday, where we will be doing Magic of Science. You'll have to check out the website because I can't remember what the topic is off the top of my head, but I'll be prepared, so should you.